Up-leveling corporate culture one conversation at a time.
This is the Corporate Cliche Podcast.
How do you include neurodivergent people? And we can expand that to all kinds of people. Number one, we are patient. Not patient as in we're going to endure or tolerate. We're just going to give ourselves the space to think or to observe what you're doing or who you are or what your presentation is. And the second, which is really, really important before jumping to correct, is curiosity.
Yeah.
When we're curious, we hold space for the real truth of that person to come forth. The problem with micromanagement is that it never allows us to actually see the entire capacity of that person. We cut them at the knees before they're able to really show us who they are. And so radical acceptance does this thing where, as well as curiosity and patience, is it allows you to see the entirety of that person. And when that person has the space to realize, to grow, to breathe, my goodness, do they bloom. And I think that those leaders, those managers, those team members who are able to not include, but to embrace the differences among them are those who are quick to pause and be curious so that that person can show themselves. You know, workplace environments become spaces of growth rather than mere performance and pretense and non-linear output, rather than what we need more than ever, which is real creativity and deep innovation.
Hi, team. Welcome back to the Corporate Cliche Podcast. I'm Jess.
And I'm Jen.
And together, we're here to have those water cooler conversations on what it's really like working in corporate. Today on the pod, we're diving into a really powerful conversation about the future of work and why kindness is no longer a nice to have, but a business imperative. We're joined by the incredible Meral Alizada, the founder of Results of Kindness, which is a hybrid consultancy and thought leadership firm dedicated to engineering human-centered workplaces and systemizing kindness for long-term business growth.
Meryl's mission is bold and deeply needed. Make humanity human again, starting in the place where many of us spend a third of our lives, work. With a background spanning high-stress industries like law, banking, and mental health, Meryl brings a unique and grounded perspective to how kindness, emotional intelligence, and ethical leadership can drive real, measurable results.
She's not just talking about kindness, she's proving it. Her work is reshaping leadership narratives and abstract ideals to practical, results-driven strategies that foster thriving teams and sustainable success.
As a global citizen with roots in England, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan, and fluent in 5 languages, Meryl brings a rich cultural lens to everything she does. Her people-first philosophy is at the heart of Results of Kindness and the ripple effect it's creating across industries. Before we jump in, if you want to connect with Meryl on socials, you can find her at Instagram at the Meral Alizada and at Results of Kindness. Without further ado, let's welcome Meryl to the podcast.
Hi, Meryl. Welcome to the Corporate Cliche Podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jess and Jen. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I just have to say, I love the name of the podcast. It's brilliant.
Thank you so much. So here at the Corporate Cliche Podcast, we love to start out all our interviews with a quintessential cliche question in the corporate landscape, which is, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I'm Meral Alizada. I was born and raised in the UK, and I am a Results of Kindness founder, a thought leader in kindness, systems thinker, and upcoming author. So really my entire life and my soul mission is based around nurturing, furthering, and celebrating kindness.
That is one of the things that drew me to your space, is that's so rare in corporate. And, you know, we talk a lot about corporate culture on this podcast. And so one of the posts that drew me to you specifically was when you talked about making humanity more human again. And, kind leaders are the most qualified leaders. And that traditional corporate way of thinking is severely lacking that kindness and that humanity. So first off, thank you so much for bringing this to light. The world is a better place to have you in it. So from your perspective, why is kindness important in the corporate world?
Thank you for your question. I think it's such an important one, and it's such an underrated and under-asked question. Sometimes it's not even considered. I think and I'll give you my demographic, I am a neurodivergent woman of colour. And so in my personal life, when I have practiced kindness, and a lot of the time you see a lack of it, and a lot of the time you see the presence of it. And I've seen that every single time, kind people who practice it with earnestness, they have deeply fulfilling, enriching lives. They're privy to human truths that are profound, that are life transforming. And that is something that I want for others. Aside from wonderful mental health, it increases mental health, it improves it, it sustains it, it deepens relational bonds. And then when you transfer that to the world of work, well, if we think of what kindness is to begin with, we'll be able to see just how important it is in the corporate world, that it's a measurable, non-negotiable business advantage. And it's this. So and I tend to eclipse kindness and humanity together, because I believe that kindness is the height of human intelligence. It's the height of human wisdom. It's wisdom in action. And so when we take that, the intention to achieve humane actions, to achieve the optimal good in any situation, and the fact that it is protected through clarity and logic, and it's a very productive concept. Kindness is incredibly strategic and productive and positive. When we apply that to the world of work, the results of kindness are many. So 13% more productivity, 26% more profit, and 20% more customer satisfaction. And really, the bottom line is that kindness does the following. It guarantees safety, it guarantees space, and it guarantees emotional intelligence to perform. And this is the foundation of companies. These are arenas of productivity, of profitability and growth. And if you don't have kindness to facilitate that, to open the mind, to create space to think, to have clear vision, to see the future, to embrace it, and to move accordingly, I always wonder, and I was always, in all of my roles, and I was watching people, the best people leave, and I was watching these leaders conduct themselves with emotional blindness, and they see the results, they see the lack of them, and they don't change. It's always been something that I've pondered and wondered, is that, we want results, we want profitability, we want productivity, we want our best people to stay. Why are we not making kindness the norm in organizations? That's a really interesting question to ask, because statistically it's profitable. Personally, it's life transforming, and spiritually and emotionally, it protects not only mental health, but spiritual and soul health. So for me, it's been my most loyal companion. It's been a source of so much transformation in my life. And it's been the reason that I did very well as a legal negotiator very early on, because emotional intelligence creates distinction. Consideration gives you trustworthiness and a leverage and memorability among your peers. And that's the wonderful thing, is that because kindness is something that's innate to us, it's recognized easily, and the results are exponential and immediate. And my only job here is not to teach kindness, it's to remind humanity of its own kindness that's already there. And it requires the right tools, the right soil for it to grow in organizations. And that's the approach that I take with results of kindness. We cultivate the soil, and then the kindness will grow uniquely to that organization and reap those beneficial long-term results.
It's such a simple concept to be kind, have kindness in the workplace. But I feel like our society these days is just so like go, go, go that there's things that have slipped through the cracks that have been unnecessary. And kindness is one of them. So I love everything you're saying because how much better would the world be if people still valued things like kindness? These things are statistically proven to have potential ROI, make your company better, and to make your employees happier, and to have the psychological safety in the workplace. And these things that human beings take for value that have, for whatever reason, have become unimportant to leaders. So I love everything that you're saying because we're trying to change corporate culture here, and bringing these values back into the workplace is how we do that.
Amazing. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think it's something that is so simple, but also at the same time, Jess, it is difficult because it's
Yeah.
unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar. We are survival of the fittest, aggressiveness, selfishness somehow became the norm. Not because it's profitable or productive or there's any good in it, because it's really a short-term strategy, but just because it's familiar. And my background is in psychology. There's a reason why, for example, it's easier to stay in the place of negativity when it doesn't reap any results, because the positive or the hopeful or the productive or the what is conducive to human good is simply unfamiliar. There's nothing inherently detrimental about it. It's simply unfamiliar. We've just lived this way for far too long, and it's the human fear of the unknown, and also the fact that our brains, because we the civilization that we've created very much rests upon this. It relies very much on this. Whereas actually we have this, and we're also a soul, and we can, and I think what kindness does is it integrates the entirety of the human being together. But if you only focus on this, you're going to see the world as a survival battleground. And how is kindness going to be a part of that? But if you see the world as a universe of transformation and of possibility, kindness becomes much easier to adopt. So it's a mindset shift. Not so much that there's anything detrimental about kindness.
I love that so much. And what resonates with me is I think this new world that we need to create, because obviously things I don't think are working well in the corporate world. And it's a really interesting time. So like you were talking about, bringing us all back into that heart space and living from there, and that unique perspective. But to me, it's balancing both of those. It's the masculine and the feminine, and bringing that to light and birthing that into the new world that's needed across the globe, but especially in corporate, where I feel like you said, we've relied too much on that aggressive, hard skills way of thinking. We've lost that empathy. We've lost that kindness. And it's about bringing that back into balance, because things can only be out of balance for so long. And I feel like we are some of those change makers to come in and say, how do we up level culture? How do we change it? How do we bring that balance back in? And so we're lucky to have you here today, because that's such an important mission.
Yeah. It's
Thank
the
you.
yin and the yang, right? It needs to be in balance. And right now we're spiraling on a path that is just not sustainable for humanity. And I know ethics and humility and vision are really essential part of your approach. And we're trying to change corporate culture one conversation at a time to create a better future for everybody. So why do you believe that these values are essential for the future of leadership?
Ethics is remarkably important because you have a standing and you know what you are working towards. So an ethical leader is led by service and mission, and therefore their decisions are not going to be based on short-term conveniences, but very much on the long-term strategy. And that is why they are much more likely to be trustworthy. Their problem solving skills are likely to be far more fundamentally multifaceted and able to touch on multiple points and multiple areas of consideration rather than merely profit. Because what ethics does is it guides you towards wisdom in your decision making, wisdom in your problem solving, wisdom in your vision. And I think that leaders today cannot be running on the adrenaline or the seduction of short-term wins and profitability over everything else, because as we've seen, the best of people leave, people get sick, people get burnt out. Decisions, when made for short-term wins, cannot measure up to the fact that we are living in a world where AI is governing and dominating, where Gen Z are demanding integrity in leaders, trustworthiness in leaders. So how can we fortify a world that maintains human excellence when actually AI can provide metrics and numbers-led strategies and ideas and initiatives, and it can do very much the brain work. So if we have all of this information, what is going to integrate it? What's going to ensure that people stay, that profitability is sustainable, that we have a vision that is clear enough and that considers the nuances and the turbulences of an unknown future? That is what ethics does. It sharpens the vision and it keeps the focus on the long term, the wider vision, rather than these small little wins. And that is what creates legacy and excellence in leadership. And that comes out in the way, the fact that excellent products are created, innovative services are delivered, and the best people come and stay and contribute to those. Because you cannot have that if you have leaders who are operating from ego or self-interest or narcissism. A narcissist only thinks about themselves, and that ship sinks very, very quickly. And I'm not saying that all leaders are narcissistic.
Yeah.
It's very
Many are.
but many are, and it's so to the detriment of their companies, so to the detriment of the quality of the work that they churn out, so to the detriment of the people that they should be keeping, but they end up bringing people and keeping people around them that merely reflect who they are and reflect a likeness of themselves, rather than those who operate with integrity, with justice, with value. These are the things that create competitiveness, competitive edge in the market. And I think the second thing that's so important is humility, and it goes back to ethics, because humility keeps leaders aware, alert, able to discern, able to see the truth behind the apparent. There's something about humble people themselves. They never seek out to confirm what they already know. They seek out to learn what they don't. And those are where the market gaps come in. That is where competitiveness comes in. That is where innovation is driven, because it's not so much about telling the world or telling the market that this is we are the best that there is, and there's no one better than us. But it's about constant transformation, constant change, taking feedback and moving that into change. I've met in the legal industry in particular, and also in the financial sector, a lot of me and other team members would tell leaders, this is where things are going wrong, this is where we can change. But without that humility, without the ability to listen and the ability to accept constructive criticism, there's a reason why now the legal industry has one of the highest levels of brain drain. The best of people are leaving because there's no change, there's no scope for transformation. And so I think that ethics gives you a direction. Ethics ensures that you think of the long term, that your decision making is based on clarity, based on discernment, and humility keeps you nimble and light and versatile. And that is so important in a world that is being governed by AI, in a world where Gen Z are rebelling against the things that perhaps Boomers or Gen X accepted. So you're going to have to listen, you're going to have to be nimble, you're going to have to reach for something and deliver something to the market that's greater than just the acquisition of profits. Gen Z want purpose over a paycheck, or over 70% of them. So that's why we need leaders who are emotionally intelligent, who are humble, who are driven by ethics, who hold integrity. And I think that, as we all know, it's quite unfortunate, but the Coldplay scandal recently with the CEO of Astronomer, we want leaders who lead with integrity, with authenticity, whose personal lives reflect the values of their organization. This is completely different to just being someone who's dictatorial. We are essentially asking leaders to be excellent.
Yeah. I think we're asking leaders to be genuine, right? We want to work with people who are the same outside of work as they are in work. It's not two different personalities. You're the same person. And for me, like, I love that you point out being humble and, having humility in the workplace, because I am all about learning and growing. So somebody that's showing me through humility that they are also in a growth mindset, giving me answers like, I'm not sure, let's find out together, or let's, learn about this, instead of giving me answers like, this is how it's always been, this is how we always do things, resonates more with me as an employee, because it shows that you're willing to change things, you're willing to move into the future, you're willing to adapt to what's needed in the present day. So what you're saying resonates with me so much.
Yeah, you hear it so much. It's almost like a mandatory script. Anytime someone comes in with new ideas, this is how we've always done this. We don't have space for this. We talk a lot about inclusion of diversity. We are now talking about neurodiversity. But I would talk about another set of people that we don't really talk about, and who have similar struggles but not entirely identical to neurodivergent. That's highly intelligent employees, and also, Gen Z, who are perhaps overindulging in psychological knowledge and self-knowledge and self-love. And that spiritual knowledge base means that we are now able to access creativity on a larger scale. And so highly intelligent employees, or Gen Z or neurodivergent employees, a lot of the time these subcategories of individuals are the first to come in and say, this is not working, I have the solution, could you at least consider it? And the door is slammed on their faces almost every time. That's how it's been for me, that's how it's been for many people. There are obviously, managers and leaders with growth mindsets, but they are far and few. And that is the reason that many of them leave. They say, I've got all of this to contribute, but if it's not going anywhere, if it's just staying with me, maybe I could do better by myself. Maybe I can go start up my own thing. And the problem is that while that may be great, not everyone is cut out for the world of entrepreneurship. So we're losing our best people by not embracing them. And again, it comes back to, if we're kind, we have a better world, we have better mental health, we have better functioning workplaces. My concern or my question is always, why are we biting the hand that has only come to feed us? It's very interesting, and it's very strange. And it's something that perplexes me every day doing this work.
There's so many nuggets that you just said. And first off, I just want to say, if you're ever doing a TED Talk, I want to be on the first row, because everything you're saying resonates so intensely with me, especially as an intuitive empath who has lived this way her whole life in a corporate world. That, I've seen a lot of narcissistic leaders in my time, and, empaths, or those that are kind, are very victim to narcissists taking advantage of that behavior. And it isn't always fun in a corporate environment, and you don't feel like you can thrive. One of the quotes that really resonates with me that came to mind as you were speaking is, if you don't feel like you fit into this world, it is because you were meant to change it. And I feel so clearly that people like this, like you, like us, those who are coming in and being those canaries in the coal mine, who are intelligent, who are new generations, they're meant to change this world. And they're not accepting it for a reason, because it needs to change. Things are out of balance, and we need to move that directionally. And I just am so grateful for you putting these messages out there in the world. You talked a lot about AI, and we love AI on this pod. I use it daily. Jess uses it daily. And you likened it to being the brain. And I feel like humans are the ones who bring in the heart, right? And so together we can be that powerful balance. We can bring a lot of beautiful things into this world to light. And I just appreciate the message that you're bringing. I think one of the quotes from you is, they're looking for purpose over a paycheck. And I think that's where we're at in our journey. That's where I'm at now. It's not just a paycheck. Yes, that feeds our family, but how can we align that with our true purpose and find joy in that?
Yeah. And, you hit the nail on the head. And one of the reasons why we started this podcast is because corporate culture is broken. People are like, oh, maybe I should leave. Maybe I should start my own thing, which is great. Obviously, Jen and I are trying to do that as well. But it's such hard work. And honestly, it's easier to get a paycheck that you can rely on. But there needs to be a balance with purpose and feeling like you want to go to work every day, like you enjoy what you're doing. And right now, with Gen Zers pushing back and being like, no, this is not okay, it's really highlighting all of the things that are broken and within the corporate culture itself. So everything that you're saying is so aligned with our vision for this podcast in general is how can we make this better? And how we make this better is bringing kindness and humanity back into the workplace. It's just great that we're talking about this right now.
Thank you so much. And Jen, I love that you talked about empaths, and I'm an empath myself. And what we've done is we've created workplaces that feel like a battleground. And I talk about systems of kindness, and I talk about perhaps more elaborate infrastructure of kindness. But really at the baseline, and all I'm asking, all that you and I, all three of us are asking, is for people to show decency and to allow people to do the job that they have been hired to do at the very basic level. And it just goes to show just how important basic kindness is, because I've had people tell me, I still remember that manager who was really encouraging of me. And I still remember when that manager gave me the day off when someone passed away. And people talk about how we need more, we need more, we need more. I always say when we return to humanity, we return to the basics, we return to the foundations that are in and of itself complete, that are fundamentally, comprehensively fulfilling and enough. And that's why a lot of the time I say, if you're not going to listen to me, or if you're not going to believe that we need these infrastructures, just think about how impactful someone's kindness has been to you. And that is what we're campaigning for. And it's sad, but when we see the world and we see that we've created these elaborate structures of cruelty and oppression, and none of it has served anyone, including the ones who have actually established this, including the manager, including the leader, or whoever is facilitating that kind of oppressive behavior in workplaces. When we see that, I just think, we're asking for so little, but that little has become so rare. And that is why we're seeing it in so many different things. We're seeing how, I read an article very recently, I don't remember the name of the writer, but it was saying how Gen Z are really big on soft relationships, or soft launches, private relationships, because they're seeing that actually, throwing it around on social media is actually not that good for their personal selves. It's not good for them. It's not right for them. It doesn't feel right. There's a reason why we are turning to knitting over clubbing. There's a reason that we're turning to real, genuine connection. Oh, that's amazing.
Well, I
This is a
crochet,
little,
but I don't go clubbing anymore, that's for sure.
and we're seeing it across the world, and I think that this is why this mission is so important, because it's come at the right time. We've tried elaborate structures of oppression. We've tried elaborate structures of making people's lives miserable. And we've tried all of these things. We are now returning to what I term the source. We are returning to our roots. We are seeking and craving connection. We're seeking and craving a loyal friend over 100, a very shiny life. And that's why I don't think that this is a mission that is elaborate. It's a very simple mission. It just requires, people to fortify it in a way that is sincere, and direct people to what kindness is, and facilitate that space. But we are returning. We are returning in many, many ways to who we truly are. And it's just the most wonderful thing to see, because clearly this message has come at the right time, in the right decade of humanity.
I also think the pandemic probably has had an impact on us wanting to return to like less shiny lives or, going back to crocheting versus clubbing because people were forced to realize what was important in their life during COVID, right? They were forced to stay at home. They were forced to not have these shiny things going on in their life and to see what was really important. So that would be an interesting discussion to have too, is just how the pandemic has affected kindness in the workplace.
I love what you said, Meryl, about returning to source. I think that's so powerful, and campaigning for kindness. And I really appreciate that mission. I think there's so many opportunities. You talk about how that has to start with leadership and probably all human beings from the inside out, right? So what does that look like for you in practice as you're guiding corporations through this, and why is that so important to have those authentic leaders?
So we do everything, but we look within. We do lots of training courses, we take all the qualifications, we ask lots of people. We don't do the thing that is at the foundation of any success story, of any real transformation comes from within. And that's why I created the Inner Leadership Program. And the first thing that I do when I deliver it is emotional pattern mapping. What are your emotional blind spots? What are the things that you've conjured up, that you've developed over time that creates a break or a limitation in your vision or in your decision making or even in the way that you see yourself? So there is a concept that I term called inner hygiene. It's something that I've coined, and it's not something that is groundbreaking. It very much is inspired by the Sufi tradition of Islam, the spiritual wing of Islam, and it says that just as we brush our teeth, just as we take showers, we essentially have to have a sense of inner hygiene. We have to essentially brush or clean or cleanse our inner selves. And so, for example, leaders who are egotistical, or leaders who are narcissistic, they have had adverse childhood experiences that makes them susceptible to short-term thinking, to relational chaos, to the inability to listen, the inability to take advice, the inability to see the greater vision and direction of the future. So, when you talk about why it's important to be authentic, if you don't know yourself, it's harder for you to access objective truths because you are so within the realm of yourself, which you're so not polluted, but perhaps distracted by the subjectivity of yourself. And the more that you cleanse and that you realize and that you invest in your self-knowledge, the stronger your ability to see the truth, to see what's going wrong, to see what's going right, to see where the opportunities are, to maintain relational cohesion within an organization. I'm not going to tell leaders how to lead. I'm going to tell them how to build the inner infrastructure that creates clarity, sincerity, humility, and perhaps even emotional ascension, so that what has developed or what has perhaps clogged their early development doesn't get in the way of their leadership. So perhaps this is sort of outside of organizational psychology and sort of workplaces in the arena of corporations, but we very much normalized infidelity. And that's something that's very, very heartbreaking to me and for me. And if you think about, the recent scandal, is that a leader who had the best of his family's interests in mind, or his best interests in mind, or the company's best interests in mind? Is that a leader that we can really trust? And is that a leader who can trust themselves? These are the questions that we should be answering. When you come into a position of authority, and that means responsibility over others, your inner world has to be remarkably strengthened. You must have a very high level of self-knowledge and integrity to win the trust of others. You've got people's lives and livelihoods in your hands. So that is not something to be taken lightly. And that is, I think, what we are expecting of leaders now. And I think, the fact that anyone can take out their phone and take a video of you. In fact, that everything can be verified. That should at least give you some kind of a push that you really need to work on your inner self. You need to ask where those emotional blocks are, those emotional blind spots are from within that are getting in the way of your life and your direction. So I hope it's not too spiritual, because I think it's the future. But I would say, in a nutshell, where are your emotional blind spots? What are you susceptible to? What are the common emotions that you fight every day? That is where you should start.
Yeah, I'm big on self-reflection. I think that it's something that's not done enough, and especially in corporate culture. I think people are quick to point and blame other people before they take the time to say, what could I have done differently? What could I have done better in this situation? Is this my fault, or where is the anger in this situation coming from? And I think that if leaders in particular spent more time having periods of self-reflection, then corporate culture would be so much better, because it's easy to point and blame other people. It's not easy to point and blame yourself. And that takes a level of humility that people are sometimes unwilling to take upon themselves. So I am super interested in your workshops, because I think it's something that's not done enough in corporate culture itself, is just to take those periods and map out your emotional blind spots and take the self-reflection needed in every single situation.
To me too, what you're saying speaks to like that need to heal the inner child, right? Like we all have these wounds that we carry with us, and how do we look in the mirror? How do we be self-reflective about that? I really love that idea of looking at those emotional blind spots, like doing that emotional cleansing, doing that inner work. For me, and anyone listening, feel free to tune out if it's too spiritual, but this is what I think the world needs. And what you said about the Sufi philosophy, I literally have a Sufi tattoo on my back, and it's a heart with wings. And I don't think we even talked about this, but the reason I got it, and it's a tribal, tattoo, but I got it because I wanted that to be like my guiding philosophy, is I want to follow my heart, and I want that to lead me down my path and where I need to go. And so I love that so much. And I feel like you were brought into my life, our lives, our listeners' lives for a reason. And I'm just grateful for your unique perspective there. You talked about the CEO and how as leaders, like we're looking for them to raise their integrity. And I think too often we're looking at their output, right? Or we're looking at how good they are in other areas of their lives. But if that integrity doesn't align, do we want this person leading, right? And I think true leaders are the ones that align that integrity with that output as well. So it's beautiful, beautiful. I appreciate you.
You mentioned it before, Jen, is that your difference, and it's something that you quoted me to me, and I'll quote, you're quoting back to you of me. And I think a lot of my life I have, and people say to me, well, at 28 and the oldest daughter of immigrants, I've come into my purpose quite late, or maybe I need to practice more self-kindness. And I always say to myself, Meryl, why did you take so long to get here? And it's because I was denying these truths from within, because I was worried that it would be too spiritual, too far-fetched, it wouldn't be marketable. And I remember presenting this to someone, a mentor, and he said, I'm not really sure how the market's going to receive this. And I thought, maybe I should remove this from the brochure. Is inner leadership too difficult or too great of an undertaking for people who don't even have time to sleep? And I thought, I'm going to leave it here, because I have found that I'm not a success story by any case, but I would say the only real success that I've had, the one that I'm most proud of, is that I come from a community where mental health is not even acknowledged. I grew up in a community where there was almost zero emotional intelligence in the way that I was parented, the way that I was dealt with. And that made me sort of one of those people who was just relentless when it came to the fact that the cycle was brought to me. It will end, and it will burn, and it will incinerate with me. And no one else will go through what I went through. And the only path, the only time that I actually saw any real change in my life was when I underwent real inner transformation. And so leaders may be great at output, they may be successful in the short term, but you can see the cracks. Yeah. You can see the cracks in their decision making. You can see the cracks in the way that their best people are leaving, and the way that they relate, or the way that they respond to the market, or even the fact that they're just so unhappy that their mental health takes a hit and they end up leaving that job altogether. So you can perform and perform and perform and perform, but if you haven't done the inner engineering, you crack. Or you can perform, or maybe you haven't realized yourself to your fullest and greatest potential. Your work may be great output, but it doesn't establish legacy. And I have found that when I have leveraged into that, results of kindness came, and opportunities like this came, and things are coming into motion, and I feel more young at heart and more alive and more fulfilled in the last 4 months than I have in the last 28 years, because I took the plunge into the woo-woo concepts of inner transformation, and I brought synthesized the spirit with the mind. And I want that for everyone, and I want that especially for leaders.
You're such a great example of a change agent in the corporate landscape. You're really questioning how things can be different, and truly you are living your quote of lead the change that you were born to embody. You were born to embody bringing kindness back into the workplace. And one thing that we like to do here in the Corporate Cliche podcast is really provide some actionable steps for people to follow, for those that have trouble maybe thinking outside the box, or really just need like a step-by-step. So I'm just curious on your thoughts on how someone can discover what that change is that they were born to embody, and what kind of advice do you have for aligning purpose with professional leadership?
I would say this is where we allow the soul, or we allow life, or we allow the intuition to take over. And I would say practice as much moments in stillness as possible. Your purpose, and I think it was me as well, I did lots and lots of different things. So I went into law because I thought I could help the world. That was, a sense of kindness. I have now transitioned into psychology because I believe that I can help people in a different regard. So that's also a manifestation of kindness. But I think that what maybe could have led me to realize this purpose earlier was that if I did 2 things: allowed more space for inner stillness and just listened to my intuition. These are very practical, but perhaps not sort of quick tick box things that you can do. So I would say the first is inner stillness. This is where truth comes to light anyway. And this is why I say when leaders do the inner work, they don't have to think too much. They embody that transformation, and energetically they align with those solutions and those resolutions much quicker. Or they can rely on their intuition to address remarkably difficult problems. So their cognitive burnout reduces considerably. So I would say to people, engage in inner stillness and just listen, and be courageous enough to act upon what comes out of that inner stillness. The answers are all within you. You just have to facilitate the space and have the courage to explore it. And the way, I think as Rumi says, walk the path, and the view, the horizon of your destiny will come to you.
It's beautiful. I want to add, for my own personal experience, you said that you've tried many different things, but I think that's also key of finding your purpose. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to go for those jobs that you might not feel qualified for, but that you're interested in, that you feel passionate about. Follow those creative leads, because you never know where it's going to turn out. So to our listeners, don't be afraid to try those new things. Take the time to have the inner moments of stillness and reflection, but say yes to new opportunities, and say yes to new creative paths, because you never know how it'll end up on the flip side. And like I said, if anything, it'll just give you experience for later on in your life.
Meryl, I also love Rumi. My favorite quote Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. And that speaks to me a lot about the need for that in leaders, but as humans as well, right? We have to look inside first. And I really feel like this is just, alignment. And I love those tips of getting still and then listening and then acting. And what are we hearing? What is it teaching us? It's really interesting because I didn't know this about you, but I did my undergraduate degree in political science, and I wanted to go into, either government or law, and was planning on going to law school. And as I was going down that route, I just found like there was not integrity in that space. And so I decided to go into business. I went back to business school. And I really love what you're saying. And this is one mission I've had as well, is like breaking that cycle. How do we do things differently? And you talk a lot about, how people remember when people were kind to you, but you also remember when they weren't. And those moments tend to live on, I think, even more impactfully over time. And so much more of that kindness, that inner stillness, that intuitively listening is needed. And I think it would change the world, right? Let alone corporate. And in my experience, I've also done negotiating in business. And every time I walked into the room, at first I thought, oh, I have to be someone different than I am. I have to negotiate like someone else. I have to do it this way. What I very quickly learned was I needed to be true to me and how I negotiate, how I build relationships with people, how I build trust, and to be in that integrity. And that got me further than it would to be out of alignment with that and to try and just rinse and repeat what someone else had done. And I just find that is so powerful. And when we can get, just like you said, you're feeling happier, you're feeling younger, more energized. When we can bring that alignment into what we're doing, that is where the magic is.
I just got goosebumps because I find that when you find your soul tribe and you set out on the path of your purpose, I get to meet angels like Jen and Jess. And it's incredible that you said this because a few months ago I gave a talk on how emotional intelligence is a seriously crucial professional skill for advocates. And it was before law students and law professors and some other professionals. And I remember recalling being in a very aggressive law firm and being required to do negotiations, firstly as an intern and then as a professional. And I remember thinking, I'm not confident enough to believe that I can win.
Yeah.
And I don't have the capacity or the brain power to manipulate someone, because manipulation takes a lot of energy. I don't know how people do it so much. But one thing, and to really summarize it, is this is why I advocate so much for honesty, because when you're honest and you create trustworthiness, you create a sense of relatability between yourself and your negotiating partner. And there you're not selling a dream. You're not making people feel that they have to watch their back, they have to rethink or overthink everything that you're saying. You're stating the facts, you're stating it with integrity. You're looking at a way that works out the best. Let's say with kindness, it's about achieving the optimal good, whatever can be achieved, the best possible outcome. And there you see, even statistically and psychologically, that those who show honesty and integrity and consideration for the other side reap repeat business, increased trust, stronger relationships. And it's interesting because we talk so much about being strategic and we talk so much about being almost performative sometimes. But when we state what we are providing and we state it with earnestness and we state it with integrity and we state it with honesty, that I believe is the key to sales. It's the key to negotiation. It's the key to achieving anything. Because ultimately, and we have to give people credit, they can see through you. They can see that you're trying to seek a greater piece of the pie and run with it. They are not going to want to be in business with you. And that's why I believe so much in soft selling. And I remember it was a client from overseas. And I remember, not intentionally, but realized this was perhaps an instinct from within. And I remember really complimenting them on their culture. That's something that I really loved. because I've always been fascinated with different cultures, and I've always been fascinated with different languages, and I speak several. And I remember that was a point of genuine connection. And I remember that person, really softening because I took the time to really connect and really appreciate who they are, not just what the deal is before us, or even putting out terms that could work for both parties. We always think that someone has to lose, and sometimes that is the case. But there is the possibility of a third choice, and that means breaking some of the ego, having enough integrity, thinking about what can work as a long-term strategy, and then you see negotiation success. So I think it's incredible, Jen, that that's also been your experience. And to those who are listening who think just like me, I was like, I'm never going to be an entrepreneur because I'm not there to manipulate people. I'm not there to sell them something that they perhaps don't want or they perhaps won't benefit from. Honesty has really gotten me at least somewhere in life, and it really will get all of us many places very far if we normalize it in business. People trust authenticity. People trust that you're trustworthy, not the opposite.
Powerful. And I think it is about building those relationships and bringing in that authenticity to those conversations, even if they're hard conversations, right? And even if we have a job to do to have the outcomes we want to get. But I agree with you. No one likes to feel used, right? And I feel like too often in those situations, that's the outcome. I feel like there is a win-win where we both get our needs met. And I think it starts with understanding what those needs are and what each of you wants to bring to the table, right? Like you can do that respectfully. It doesn't have to be a destructive process or a destructive relationship where you leave feeling icky.
Yeah.
We need more of that.
Yeah. It's even with friendships, I think, me being autistic, I've always found that I tend to take them a little bit more seriously. And by seriously, I mean that I give a lot of my heart and I give a lot of my love, and I see them as, familial bonds because they're chosen family. And I found that a lot of the time, in these little disputes, let's not talk about legal negotiations, talk about, everyday life. When we talk to people, when we relate to people in a way where we show them that we are on the same side, relationships bloom. You bloom, the other person prospers, the relationship, bonds together. But I've found that, let alone in corporations, in life, the moment there's a dispute, people separate sides.
Yeah.
And it's about how can I win? How can I gain? And how can I get my needs met? But really the ultimate way that we can get our needs met in a way that's worthwhile, the right kind of needs, is by working together, by connecting, by finding, I don't think of it as compromise, but I think of it as cooperation, of a sense of camaraderie, rather than as a sense of competition that just shouldn't be there. And I think that's why a lot of my work is about rethinking competition. How can we change the way that we see competitiveness, not as something where we ruin other people or that we throw them off the ladder, but that we excel from within and we lift others up. Surely that's more sustainable, profitable, worthy, really self-fulfilling. And I say this in a poem. It's like, do you love yourself enough to do good? And do you love yourself even more to make good your entire existence? So, that's something that I really, really live by. And that's a way to really rethink, how helpful is it for ourselves to be so defensive and to be so selfish and to be so blind to the other person before us.
I think that doesn't have to be at the expense of other people, right? And I think sometimes we think our own needs are met at someone else's expense, or people think that that's the way it has to be done, and both needs, right, can be met in that process. And I love that poem. And I think you need to write a book of quotes and poems, and I will be your first purchaser of that. We'll definitely put that quote on the pod. Another quote that you have that I absolutely love is, people bloom when we give them grace. And that resonated so heavily with me. Like, I love that concept of embracing people just in general, right in front of you as they are, and giving them that grace. We've all been in situations where toxic bosses have been suffocating us, right? And they don't allow us to bloom. They micromanage so heavily. Whereas you do remember those leaders that were so impactful, that allow you to just blossom and shine, and they encourage it and they water you so that you can grow. And I just think that's really powerful. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
So thank you. Thank you so much, Jen and Jess. I think this has been one of the most heartwarming conversations. And I think that just goes to show that profit and happiness and the heart and the mind can come together, and they are not mutually exclusive concepts. We can have both. And I think that the rhythm and the emotional atmosphere of this podcast very much proves that. And I think, again, that comes from the fact that as someone who has always been different, who's been slower or faster in different things, has reacted differently, had different needs, being autistic and being different and an empath and all these sort of sub-identities, I've found that because I have not experienced that level of acceptance, that has deepened my ability to radically accept and love others. And I hope that doesn't seem too arrogant, but I think that the people who are the least, not unloved, but the least appreciated, tend to deepen their capacity for love and for acceptance. And it comes from the story of a child, of a genius, and one of the most incredible role models that I could ever know. And I was working in a nursery, and he had quite severe autism. And I remember everyone, perhaps, I don't think it was malicious, but it was an immediate judgment. And it reminded me of my time in corporations, in law, in consulting and education, where I would do something differently, and the first response was anger or micromanagement or a challenge. And I just thought, how unhelpful is this? And I had a similar question put to me recently for another podcast, and it was, how do you include neurodivergent people? And we can expand that to all kinds of people. Number one, we are patient. Not patient as in we're going to endure or tolerate. We're just going to give ourselves the space to think or to observe what you're doing or who you are or what your presentation is. And the second, which is really, really important before jumping to correct, is curiosity. Yeah. When we're curious, we hold space for the truth, the real truth of that person to come forth. The problem with micromanagement is that it never allows us to actually see the truth or the entire profile or the entire capacity of that person. We cut them at the knees before they're able to really show us who they are. And so radical acceptance does this thing where, as well as curiosity and patience, is it allows you to see the entirety of that person. And when that person has the space to realize, to grow, to breathe, my goodness, do they bloom. And I think that those leaders those managers, those team members who are able to not include, but to embrace the differences among them, are those who are quick to pause and be curious, so that that person can show themselves, can show the wisdom in their work, can show what it is that they're doing. And that is how they bloom. And that is how environments, workplace environments, become spaces of growth rather than mere performance and pretense and non-linear output, rather than what we need more than ever, which is real creativity and deep innovation. So it comes from really someone who hasn't had a lot of patience delivered to them, and has seen that when that patience has been given, when that curiosity and that open-armed embrace has been given, people who have been hopeless cases that I've worked with, clients or children or even cases, they've transformed because I've only just given them the chance to be seen and to be understood and to progress and to see what comes out of it and what comes of them.
Curiosity is one of my personal core values. I am a curious person. I was that child that always asked the question, why? Why is this? Why is that? Why does this happen? Because I've always just been curious about the world and people around me. And you don't learn about the world and people around you unless you're willing to ask the questions. And so I think that that's something that gets snuffed out in the corporate landscape, is the ability to be curious. And I don't know about you, Jen, but I think that we need to have Meryl on for another episode
Round two,
specifically to
absolutely.
talk about micromanagement, because I know
Yes.
you're feeling that struggle at work. I feel that struggle at work, because what micromanagement does is it snuffs out the ability to be curious. It's a level of control over your employees that doesn't allow people to bloom. So I say we have round two specifically about micromanagement on another episode.
agree. Yeah, there's a great article about how when great employees become silent and what that means in a culture. And that's exactly what it reminds me of, is if you're shining too brightly, or micromanagers, narcissists, they don't like that. And they like to put out that light and, like you said, snuff out that curiosity. And then over time, you just burn out, right?
Yeah.
And no one wants to be in an environment like that. They can't grow, they can't bloom. So powerful.
It's amazing that you talk about it, and again, there's just so much resonance with like-minded, not just like-minded minds, but like-minded souls. And I think, like you said, Jen, it's almost never about competence.
Yeah.
It's almost always about fear, some kind of irrational fear of losing control, or the fact that someone dares to shine brightly and dares to be better than maybe the managers who are managing them. But what it does is it does everything possible to keep growth and customer retention, talent retention, and innovation at an all-time low. And it's incredible how much we've normalized it and just how little there is to prevent it. And that's why when I sort of first started Results of Kindness, the first thing I thought of was, I'm going to talk and I'm going to snuff out micromanagement, because it really is, I think, the most crippling black hole of productivity. And again, it's this sort of thing is, why wouldn't you want your greatest stars to be contributing? Why wouldn't you want to at least see what this person is capable of before you cut them at the knees? It's, it's just, it's very strange, because if we're really serious about results, why are we practicing the things that churn out the total opposite of them? And, of course, we talk about statistics, but it just reminds me of just how much I've been micromanaged and just disengaged I became, and just how guilty I felt because I wasn't as willing to contribute, because I knew that it was a black hole, that it fell nowhere, that it got nowhere when I did. And just how so many other women of color, neurodivergent individuals, highly intelligent individuals, people who are shining lights, how many of them have been put into some kind of PTSD, some kind of trauma from this. And it's very sad, more than anything, more than being a statistical disaster.
We talk a lot about mental health on this show, and it's not because Jen and I are mental health professionals, but because you spend a lot of your life in the workplace. And if things are toxic, or if you're being micromanaged where you're having this negative experience, that really has an impact on your mental health. And we've found that talking about our experience and our own mental health is helpful for people. So what are some actions that people can take to protect their own mental health? What are things that you've done that have been helpful in the past? And do you have any call outs to corporate on how things could be better?
I love the intention behind the question, because a lot of the time that's the only thing that is left, which is, I can't change anything. I have to essentially manage myself. This is probably not going to be a very commonplace answer. I hope it may not even be satisfactory, but I would say that you could be the most Zen master in terms of mindfulness, journaling, all of these things. But I think as someone who has been relentlessly working on themselves from a spiritual and emotional perspective, and also as someone who has experienced these things, I can absolutely say that you can be the most enlightened person, but really the responsibility and the determination of your mental health and the quality of it very much comes down to what the organization is normalizing and enabling, and the managers, because a lot of the time it's not so much the C-suites who have the space to, to really wrap their arms around every employee, but it's the managers. Managers cause so much destruction in organizations. And so the cure, I could sit here and tell you that I did journaling, I could sit here and tell you that I did mindfulness, but the soul is very clever, and it knows that you simply cannot stay healthy and sane in an environment that is constantly blasting imbalance at you and constantly testing your capacity to survive. So I would say the cure, and that's why I talk about systemic kindness. I don't talk about sort of relational. I do, but really it's about the foundational solution. The foundational solution is look at what you're normalizing. Look at your policies around office politics, around bullying. How are you actually implementing that? And what kind of managers, leaders, people of authority are you hiring? Are you retaining? And you are rewarding and promoting? Because these are the ultimate determiners of mental health. And so I think I wouldn't say unfair, but I think it's a very difficult, and I don't feel ethically content in saying, you should journal and things like that, although this is important. But there comes a point where even those practices don't go far enough. It's very much the onus is on the organizations themselves. It's such a difficult, painful thing to tell employees that, you have to do this, you have to do that, because ultimately, if it's a systemic, procedural concept, that if that's the issue, it requires procedural systemic transformation. It cannot be something that can be resolved by the personal practices of a single employee who's already at their tether end.
I agree 100%. And that PTSD is so real, and it has an effect, like you said, Jess, on all of our mental health. And it is so hard to thrive in an environment like that systematically oppresses us, especially when we are capable adults, right? That environment of micromanaging might be needed in a factory with robots or, to that level of detail, but humans should be empowered. And I think as leaders, it is our job to do that and find where people can thrive and grow and shine that spotlight on them. I love a few things that you said, and I agree, Jess, with your curiosity. And Meryl, that's one thing that's so powerful for me, is just seeking to understand without making assumptions. Getting that information first, I think, is so critical. And that importance of diversity of thought, seeking others for their opinions, because we all think very differently. We all have very different experiences, and we're all interpreting the world in a different way. And by including all of those people, it makes us all better. We need every color out there to paint a beautiful picture, right? So I'm so blown away by this conversation, and you've spent so much time with us. Thank you for this really rich conversation. It's going to change my life already, you being a part of it. And, our listeners are very lucky to hear your perspective. So definitely we'll have you back for more, but just a couple closing questions. One, do you have a book that you could recommend to our audience? We do a book club here. What would you recommend if they had one book to read?
If they had one book to read, I think because we've talked about inner stillness, we've talked about inner transformation, we've talked about kind of zoning out all of the noise, I would say the biggest book that I would recommend to you is your journal. That changed my life, because a lot of the time we are constantly being thrown at with lots and lots of information. Maybe this is a neurodivergent person speaking, but I found that the truths that have come out of my journal have been far more effective, tailor-made, spearheading in terms of the unique struggles and difficulties and opportunities that were coming into my life than any book. I often find that perhaps for me, or maybe I've just reached that time in my life where actually, because kindness is such a niche, I have to be asking myself more of the questions rather than another author. But I have often found that if you really want transformation as a leader, as a manager, as an employee, as a human being, speak to yourself. And where you don't have those answers, go and seek out the answers in books that have a very clear delivery. But the book that I would recommend is your journal, because I say this, without inner kindness, and I have something called the 3 planes of kindness, and it's inner, relational, systemic. Without inner kindness, and that comes from self-discovery, we cannot have kindness at all. The reason that we are unkind is not because we're all monsters. It's because there's something that has been taken from us, or something that hasn't been resolved within us, that is sort of facilitating the desire to be in survival mode, to be defensive, to be selfish sometimes. So your journal.
It's beautiful.
I feel like we all need to bow down to your infinite wisdom, Meryl, because
Yes,
you've just
definitely.
really dropped some bombs on our podcast today. So appreciate your wisdom and your insights.
Thank you so much. Thank
It
you.
goes back to what you were talking about with getting quiet and listening and taking action from that. And I don't journal as often as Jess, but when I do, I have a stack of journals in my desk, and sometimes I will be confused as to what to do next, and I'll just open my journals and I will flip through them, and I will find a message that is meant for me in this moment that I wrote 2 years ago or a year ago. And it's so interesting, like you said, how these signs from the universe or messages or your own intuition already knows the action you need to take. It might just be that you're not listening to it, right? Or the timing wasn't right. And so getting quiet, hearing that inner voice, and then actioning it. I think that's absolutely beautiful. That's going to be one of my key takeaways from this episode, is remembering that.
I wanted to ask Jen, because that's something that I've done. I've gone through and then I've been,
Yeah.
goodness, was this meant for me at this time? Perhaps to test my theory, were those messages that, or those lines that you wrote from yourself or to your journal, were they more valuable or any other book that you've read?
I 100% agree with you, and I've never thought about it the way that you phrased it today, that your own intuition is going to be more powerful from your experience and your lens, the specific nature of what you're asking and the challenges you're facing with all of the information that you have to act on it than anyone externally could give you. Because although pieces might apply, you have the full picture, you have the full feeling and heart of it. I think that's absolutely incredible insight. And I've read a lot of self-development books. I know Jess is a huge reader as well. But it tends to be more, I take little pieces from it. I take quotes from it. I take an action plan from it, or a little tip. But when you look through the information you have received and the advice you've given to yourself, it's going to be better than anyone else. That's
Absolutely.
very powerful. I love that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I'm coming out with a book, so I'm saying actually, no.
I'm going to read
Yeah,
it. Jess
read
is going to read it.
books.
We're going
Read
to
your
review it on the podcast.
When it's ready for pre-order, let us know. We'll
thank
link
you
it
so
on our
much.
socials.
Yeah, tell us
Thank
about
you
it.
so much.
Tell us in concept. I would assume it's a culmination of what you're teaching now.
Yes, so it's called Kindness's Infrastructure. And so essentially, what's fantastic is that kindness is now a growing but still niche buzzword. Empathy is, I think, far more established, which is wonderful. And empathy is an element of kindness, but it's not the full picture. And it's essentially very much develops on the services and the ideas that I already have that are part of the delivery of results of kindness. But it also talks, very much about the future, and that if we really, really want kindness to be something that is taken seriously, that's not just about a random act of kindness or be nice to your colleagues, although all three of us know how valuable that is. It's about systems of kindness. It's about a world where we don't have to do so much emotional labor between individuals, because the systems that hold up human destiny have been rigged towards kindness, equity, and justice itself. And it's very much framed around workplaces. But of course, as you know, both of you know, a little spiritual teacher within all of this work, it very much looks at the future of humanity and what we will need to bring ourselves out of these global crises.
We'll have you back for a book club on the pod
A live book club episode with Meryl
thank
instead
you
of just doing
with
my
the
review.
author herself.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What's next for you, and how can people connect with you to continue to change their corporations, bring kindness in, look at themselves internally, and ultimately change the world with this important work?
Thank you so much. I just have to say, I came in with a mission of kindness, but from right from the beginning, you know, Jen and Jess, you have delivered to me the most genuine kindness I've seen in a very long time, and the space that you've created, the support that you've given me, it makes me remarkably emotional in terms of how grateful I am. And your organizations and your people and your families are incredibly lucky to have you. And I say this because where we see kind people, reward and hold them up to the sky and to the light, because they are rare, and I'm just so grateful. In terms of what's next for me, so I was sort of asking myself, who am I really? And I am a thought leader, an author, and a systems thinker. And the way that I am delivering this message, implementing kindness in workplaces, is through keynote speaking, masterclasses, workshops, and then ultimately I have created an infrastructure of systems of kindness that will eventually be, and I hope and dream and work towards, creating infrastructures of kindness. So those systems will eventually be implemented into organizations. And so if you're looking for a speaker on kindness, if you're looking for someone who can teach tangible skills on kindness through a workshop or masterclass, do connect with me. I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. Instagram and all the other handles are Meral Alizada. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the company itself, it's resultsofkindness.com. And there's a little bit of shameless promotion right at the end.
No shame
That's what we're here
in
for.
bringing kindness to the world. We love
Yes.
it. We love to see it. And thank you for all the great work you're doing. And thank you for being with us. You've touched our hearts as much as we've impacted you.
Thank you so much. It's been an utter pleasure, and really the honor is all mine. And I can't wait to see the future of corporate cliche, because there's so many podcasts out there. But I think that the inner hygiene, the inner quality of their hosts is what's going to create excellence in reach and delivery and impact. And I see that for corporate cliche through yourselves.
I love that.
We're going to try, that's for sure. We're trying to change the world here.
Yeah, we're trying to up-level corporate and the world with these conversations. And so you're a part of that change. So thank you, Meryl. You're absolutely incredible. And we are so lucky to have you today. And wish you all the best of luck for what's next for you. And to our audience, please connect with her, because we all could benefit from the work she's doing. So thank you so much, Meryl. You're
Thanks, Meryl.
amazing.
Utter pleasure.
Bright light in this world.
Thank you so much.
That was such an amazing conversation, Jess. I don't know how you feel, but there was so much that impacted me and so much that resonated with me. I found myself getting chills. I found myself saying, hey, that speaks to me. So I want to know from your perspective, what's one thing that you will implement from this? I know for me, it will be listening to my own inner voice, getting quiet, taking action on that guidance. And all too often, I think I ignore that. What about you?
Yeah, I thought this was such a great interview. There were so many nuggets of such great insights and wisdom, not only just about kindness in the workplace, but just about corporate in general. But I think the thing that hit me the hardest was her advice on reading your own books. I am an avid reader, as you know. I read a lot of mixed genres, but I read a lot of personal development, but I also journal a lot. And I've never really considered taking the time to reread through my journals, especially as years go on. So rereading my own books, I think, is the nugget of information that I'm going to start implementing in my own life.
I love that so much, because I relate to that as well. And honestly, I could go back and write down 50 different quotes from this episode that just really spoke to me. But that is one thing that I have done. And I think we tend to discount our own opinion, emotions, insights, but they're so powerful. And so for me, that's the takeaway, is just reminding myself that I need to listen to my own inner guidance, to get quiet, to write that down, to really be thoughtful in asking those questions and listening, because I'm the best one who's prepared to act from that, and really just taking that action. And for me, it's always, that very next step, we don't have to have the whole plan, but what's next for me. And the other thing that spoke to me was just really like aligning on your purpose. And it was pretty powerful to think about how, you know, kindness is so lacking in corporate, and how have we stayed kind? So I'll be reflecting on that for a while, but I definitely think we need to have Meral back to continue this discussion and keep up-leveling culture and changing the world one conversation at a time.
I'm here for it. Bye.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Our goal with this podcast is to share our experiences navigating the corporate landscape through relatable conversations that empower you to thrive in the 9-to-5.
Honestly, we would love to connect with you on socials to continue this conversation. You can find us at the Corporate Cliche Podcast. Please send us a DM with any thoughts or questions that you had from this episode.
And if you liked this episode, make sure to share with your work bestie. Also, please rate and review us on your favorite platform of choice, and subscribe to stay up to date with the Corporate Cliche. Your support helps us with our mission to change corporate culture.